Welcome back to the Grep News Podcast. I'm Bam Rather, and our show today is about a Venezuelan strongman's arrest, a deadly tragedy claiming 40 lives, and the former president's latest power play. So let me get this straight. We've reached the point where regime change is just a really aggressive form of law enforcement? Saturday morning, pre-dawn, Caracas. U.S. Special Forces breach a compound and capture a sitting head of state, Nicolás Maduro, president of Venezuela, along with his wife. By the time Trump announces it at Mar-a-Lago, at least 40 people are dead. Cuba reports 32 of its citizens among the casualties. And here's the thing that should bother all of us. We still don't know who most of those people were. Civilians, military, bystanders who happened to be in the wrong compound at the wrong time. Trump calls it an assault like people have not seen since World War II. Nothing says measured counter-narcotics operation like comparing yourself to D-Day. He's standing there announcing that America will now run the country until we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. His words. Not regime change, mind you. Just running another sovereign nation until we decide who should lead it. The question isn't whether this violates international law. Spoiler alert, it absolutely does. The real question is whether anyone with the power to do something about it actually cares. Here's what we know for certain. Verified across multiple sources, Maduro is now in a Brooklyn jail, the same troubled facility that once held Ghislaine Maxwell, facing narco-terrorism charges that were originally filed during Trump's first presidency. His wife Celia Flores was captured with him, though her legal status remains unclear. Within hours, Venezuela's Supreme Court ordered Vice President Delcy Rodríguez to assume the role of interim president, carefully labeling Maduro's absence as temporary rather than permanent, a constitutional sleight of hand that allows them to avoid the 30-day election requirement. And that's when I realized we're watching something unprecedented unfold, the administrative capture of a nation, dressed up in the language of counter-narcotics operations. Because here's where the story splits. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, son of Cuban immigrants, longtime critic of leftist Latin American governments, briefed Congress in December. According to Democratic Senator Chris Murphy, that briefing characterized this as a counter-narcotics operation. Not regime change, just going after the drug traffickers. Murphy's exact words, they literally lied to our face. But Trump isn't even trying to maintain that fiction. He's openly talking about having our very large U.S. oil companies, the biggest anywhere in the world, go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, the oil infrastructure, and start making money for the country. Not for America, for Venezuela, he says. As if that distinction matters when you've just conducted a military raid that eliminated dozens of people to make it happen. The paper trail here is fascinating in its transparency. Trump campaigned on avoiding foreign wars. He won, in part, by positioning himself against endless military interventions. Then he authorizes what amounts to a decapitation strike on a sovereign government. The cognitive dissonance is almost beautiful in its brazenness. Now let's talk about Delcy Rodríguez, because her story is where this gets really interesting. She's 56, a lawyer educated in Britain and France. Her father was a socialist leader arrested for involvement in kidnapping an American businessman in the 70s. He later passed away in police custody. She's held nearly every major ministerial position under Chavez and Maduro: economic minister, foreign affairs minister, petroleum minister. She helped stabilize Venezuela's crisis-stricken economy. Unlike most of Maduro's inner circle, she was never criminally indicted by the U.S., though she faced sanctions during Trump's first term. And here's what nobody's talking about. She might be the most strategically positioned person in Latin American politics right now.
My name is Tom Sachs. I'm an artist in New York City. For nearly 2 decades, I have been collaborating with Nike.
Nike running is for runners. Nike basketball is for basketball. Nike craft is for everyone else.
Watch how the messaging evolved. Saturday, her first televised address. She calls the Trump government extremists, maintains Maduro's legitimacy, says what is being done to Venezuela is an atrocity that violates international law. Classic defiance. Then Sunday, Trump issues a warning. she is going to pay a very big price, probably bigger than Maduro. 24 hours later, Rodriguez posts on Instagram. We invite the U.S. government to collaborate with us on an agenda of cooperation oriented towards shared development within the framework of international law. That pivot from extremists to cooperation tells you everything about the pressure she's under. Trump and Rubio claim she's being gracious, willing to work with them. But that first address showed no indication of cooperation. Something changed. We just don't know what. Notice what's missing from every single report. Venezuelan opposition voices. Where's Juan Guaido? The guy the U.S. previously recognized as legitimate president. Where are the other opposition figures who spent years begging for American intervention? They're conspicuously absent from this narrative, which suggests this operation wasn't coordinated with them. This wasn't about empowering Venezuelan democracy. This was about control. And then there's Cuba. Miguel Diaz-Canel, Cuba's president, called it an unacceptable, vulgar, and barbarian kidnapping, an act of state terrorism, comparable only to the crimes against humanity committed by Israeli Zionism in the Gaza Strip. Strong words. Cuba held pro-Maduro solidarity events. But here's the existential crisis they're facing. Venezuela's subsidized oil has been keeping Cuba's aging electrical system alive. The entire grid failed in September. They've suffered a dozen nationwide outages in 14 months. Nearly 10 million Cubans affected. A Cuban doctor who served in Venezuela told reporters, "It's really pretty unpleasant news for Cuba and the world." A 68-year-old retiree named Reina Maria Arias said, "Venezuela helped us a lot, and now with this problem, I don't know where we're going to end up." Rubio, when asked about Cuba, said, "If I lived in Havana and I was in the government, I'd be concerned, at least a little bit." It's the kind of statement that sounds casual, but carries the weight of historical memory. American troops occupied Cuba twice in the 20th century. The CIA backed multiple attempts to topple Castro's government, including the Bay of Pigs invasion. Cubans know exactly what American military intervention looks like. Though Trump later told the New York Post he's not considering military action against Cuba, which, given everything else, is somehow not reassuring. Here's my favorite detail, the kind that reveals everything. This operation follows months of U.S. attacks on alleged narco boats that caused at least 110 casualties. The U.S. seized sanctioned oil tankers off Venezuela's coast. Trump established a naval blockade. This wasn't a surgical strike. This was the culmination of an escalating campaign that's been eliminating people for months, and almost nobody was paying attention. Legal experts are quietly asking whether those narco boat strikes constitute violations of international humanitarian law. The 1973 War Powers Resolution requires congressional approval for military operations. The Constitution says only Congress can declare war. But we've been watching those constitutional guardrails erode for decades, and this feels like the moment they finally snap. Senator Murphy gets it. He's calling this a violation of constitutional war powers. But beyond him, we're getting minimal congressional reaction. No statements from Pentagon officials, no military commanders explaining the operation, no analysis from international law experts. The silence from people who should be screaming is deafening.
Building a new product? Temez Labs takes you from napkin sketch to the App Store. Trusted by Fortune 500s for quality, security, and speed. Book your free strategy session at temez.ai.
And here's the beautiful absurdity of it all. American forces don't actually control Venezuela. Despite Trump's claims about running the country, Maduro's government is still functioning through Rodriguez and military backing. The Supreme Court legitimized her. The armed forces support her. Trump can capture the president, but he can't capture the state apparatus. So what happens now? Maduro appears in Manhattan federal court tomorrow afternoon, facing charges of narco-terrorism conspiracy, cocaine importation conspiracy, possession of machine guns and destructive devices. His son and 3 others are also charged, though we don't know their status. Venezuela's constitution technically requires elections within 30 days when a president becomes permanently unavailable. But the Supreme Court's temporary designation creates a loophole allowing Rodriguez to stay in power for 90 days to 6 months. Some analysts think she might try to extend it even longer. Trump says he's designating various people for Venezuelan leadership roles. Who? We don't know. How will U.S. oil companies actually operate Venezuela's infrastructure? Unclear. What's the evidence for the narco-terrorism charges? Not disclosed. What about Russia and Iran's response beyond verbal condemnation? Silence. The architecture of this story is almost perfect in its gaps. Every question leads to another unanswered question. Every answer reveals a deeper contradiction. Because ultimately, this isn't about Maduro or narco-terrorism or even Venezuela's oil. This is about whether military force can simply extract inconvenient leaders and call it justice. It's about whether sovereignty means anything when you have enough special forces operators. It's about the distance between counter-narcotics operations and regime change, and whether that distance was ever real or just something we told ourselves to sleep better at night. 40 people are gone because of this. At least. Maybe more. We still don't know their names. And that, more than anything, tells you what kind of story this really is. Thank you for listening to GREP News. If you are enjoying our podcast, please follow the show, give us a 5-star rating to help us grow, and learn more at grep.news. Until next time.
GREP News. Thomas.